The leather chairs in my lawyer's office squeaked as James shifted uncomfortably beside me. I kept my eyes fixed on Miranda Bennett, the sharp-eyed attorney I'd hired specifically for this moment. Her office overlooking downtown Chicago provided the perfect backdrop for what I knew would be a memorable meeting. So, shall we begin? Miranda pulled out the thick document, her red manicure a slash of color against the crisp white pages. I felt James's hand squeeze mine, probably meant to be reassuring, but I detected the slight tremor in his fingers. 6 months into our engagement, and here we were, about to discuss the details that could make or break our future together. Of course, I straightened my spine, channeling the confidence that had made me one of the youngest VPs at my tech firm. James, honey, I know we've talked about this in general terms, but I wanted to make sure everything was clear before the wedding. Miranda began reading, and I watched James's expression shift from mild amusement to confusion. The standard clauses about asset protection rolled by, and he nodded along, that familiar half-smile playing on his lips. Wait, James interrupted, leaning forward. Can you read that last part again? Miranda adjusted her glasses. Certainly. In the event of dissolution of marriage, all intellectual property developed by either party during the marriage remains the sole property of its original creator, including but not limited to software patents, algorithmic innovations, and digital platforms. James laughed, the sound bouncing off the floor-to-ceiling windows. Seriously, Olivia? You think I'm after your code? I remained silent. My fingers laced tightly in my lap. He didn't know about the artificial intelligence breakthrough I was on the verge of patenting. Nobody did, except my legal team. There's more, Miranda continued, her voice steady and professional. The laughter died in James's throat as she turned the page. I'd spent weeks crafting these terms, ensuring every possible scenario was covered. My company, my innovations, my future, they were all protected. Furthermore, Miranda continued, any attempt to access, copy, or replicate proprietary information belonging to either party will result in immediate financial penalties of up to $5 million, payable to the wronged party. James's face drained of color. $5 million? Olivia, this is insane. We're married, not launching a corporate merger. I finally turned to face him, taking in the features I'd fallen in love with. The strong jawline, the kind brown eyes that now showed a hint of hurt. James, you knew I was serious about protecting my work. Remember our third date, when you asked what I did and I spent 2 hours explaining quantum computing? Yeah, but this. He loosened his tie, a nervous habit I'd noticed during our first month together. This feels like you don't trust me. Miranda cleared her throat delicately. There's a section about personal assets as well. The next few clauses were standard. Separate property remaining separate, joint accounts requiring dual authorization for major withdrawals. But then we hit the part that made James sit up straight. Any shared residence purchased during the marriage must be maintained as a technologically secure environment, with all security protocols designed and approved by both parties. Miranda read, home automation systems, security cameras, and digital infrastructure must meet specified security standards. You want to turn our future home into a fortress? James asked incredulously. I want to protect both of us, I replied quietly. You're in cybersecurity, James. You know how vulnerable smart homes can be. And with what I'm working on, I stopped myself. Even here, in this secure office, I couldn't risk saying too much. The AI system I was developing could revolutionize everything, or destroy it all if it fell into the wrong hands. James ran his hands through his dark hair, making it stand up in frustrated spikes. Okay, let me get this straight. You want military-grade security in our home. A $5 million penalty if I so much as peek at your laptop. And he squinted at the document. What's this about annual security clearance renewals? Miranda began to explain, but I cut in. It's not just about you, James. These provisions go both ways. Your work with government contractors, I know there are things you can't tell me. This protects us both. But we're supposed to be partners, he protested. Building a life together, sharing things. We will share things, I assured him. Our lives, our love, our future. But some doors need to stay locked, for everyone's safety. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the office floor, and I watched them creep across the carpet like fingers reaching for secrets. Miranda turned to another section, the pages whispering against each other in the quiet office. Now, regarding social media and digital presence. There's more? James's voice cracked slightly. Both parties agree to maintain strict privacy settings on all social media accounts. No photos, location data, or personal information about the other party may be shared without express written consent, Miranda read. This includes but is not limited to Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and any platforms that may emerge during the marriage. I watched James's face carefully. As a cybersecurity expert, he should understand this better than anyone. Every digital footprint could be tracked, every casual post analyzed. One innocent vacation photo could reveal more than intended. The penalty for violations of the social media clause is set at $250,000 per incident, Miranda added. This isn't about trust, I said softly, reaching for James's hand. He let me take it, but his fingers remained stiff. It's about being smart. You've seen what happened to other tech executives when their personal lives became public. I get that, he replied, his voice tight. But Olivia, some of these terms, it's like you're expecting everything to fall apart before we even begin. Miranda cleared her throat. There are also some interesting provisions about future technological developments. I straightened in my chair. This was the part I'd spent the most time on, the section that protected not just what I had created, but what I might create in the future. Any technological breakthroughs, particularly in the fields of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, or neural interfaces. Miranda began. Stop, James interrupted, standing up abruptly. Neural interfaces? Olivia, what aren't you telling me? I met his gaze steadily. I can't tell you everything, that's the point, but what I'm working on, it could change everything. The way we think, the way we process information, the way we interact with technology itself. The silence in the room felt heavy, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Miranda sat perfectly still, her hands folded over the document. Remember last month, I continued, when I disappeared into my home office for 3 days straight? I wasn't just coding. I was laying the groundwork for something unprecedented. Something that needs to be protected at all costs. James sank back into his chair, his expression a mix of awe and uncertainty. Is this why you've been having those intense meetings with the Pentagon representatives? My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't realized he'd noticed those meetings. How did you? I saw the visitor logs at your office when I brought you lunch last week, he admitted. I didn't mean to pry, but the security clearance levels caught my eye. Miranda shifted in her chair, reminding us of her presence. Perhaps we should continue with the agreement. I nodded, but James wasn't finished. All this time, I thought you were just being intensely private about your work. But this. He gestured at the document. This is something else entirely. Yes, I said simply. It is. And if you want to walk away now, I'll understand. The weight of that statement hung in the air between us, heavy with implications and possibilities. James stood again, but this time he moved to the window, staring out at the Chicago skyline. The late afternoon sun gilded the edges of his profile, and for a moment I saw him as I had that first night at the tech conference, brilliant, curious, and unafraid of complexity. The neural interface project, he said slowly, still facing the window. Is it connected to the quantum AI architecture you mentioned when we first met? I felt a chill run down my spine. He'd put it together faster than I'd expected. James. He turned back to face me, his expression unreadable. Because if it is, then these provisions aren't just about protecting intellectual property. They're about protecting humanity itself. Miranda's pen clicked against her desk in the silence that followed. She'd helped draft this agreement, but even she didn't know the full scope of what I was protecting. Yes, I whispered. The admission felt both terrifying and liberating. What I'm working on, it's beyond anything currently imaginable. The ability to interface directly with quantum systems using neural pathways, to process information at speeds that would make today's supercomputers look like pocket calculators. James returned to his seat, but this time he leaned forward intently. And the military applications are just one aspect, I finished. Think bigger. Think about medical breakthroughs, scientific discoveries, space exploration. Think about solving climate change, ending world hunger, curing diseases we don't even understand yet. Which is why the prenup includes clauses about future technologies that don't even exist, he said, understanding dawning in his eyes. And why the security protocols for our home need to be absolutely unbreakable, I added. Miranda pulled out another document. There's an addendum specifically about future technological developments and their implications for both parties. James held up his hand. Before we get to that, Olivia, why didn't you tell me sooner? I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. Because once you know, everything changes. Our lives, our future, even the way we'll have to live, it all becomes more complicated. I needed to be sure. Sure of what? Sure that you'd understand why I need these protections. Sure that you'd be willing to live with the restrictions. Sure that I swallowed hard, sure that you'd still want to marry me after knowing the full scope of what you're getting into. The city lights were starting to twinkle on in the gathering dusk outside the window. James reached across and took my hand, his grip firm and sure. Did you know that my cybersecurity firm just landed a contract with NASA? I blinked, thrown by the sudden change in topic. No, I didn't, because I couldn't tell you. Just like I can't tell you about the 3 other government projects I'm working on, or about the quantum encryption protocols we're developing. He smiled slightly. I get it, Olivia. More than you know. Miranda cleared her throat. Should we continue with the addendum? I felt something inside me relax, a tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Actually, I said, I think we should add something to the agreement first. James raised an eyebrow. More restrictions? No, I replied. A clause about collaboration. Collaboration? Miranda asked, her pen poised above her legal pad. Yes, a framework for how we can work together, while still maintaining necessary security protocols. I turned to James. Your quantum encryption expertise combined with my neural interface technology, we could create something revolutionary. James leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. So that's why you approached me at the tech conference last year. You weren't just attracted to my charming personality. I didn't know about your work then, I protested. I really did just think you were cute when you were arguing about blockchain vulnerabilities. Miranda cleared her throat again. If we're adding a collaboration clause, we'll need to establish clear boundaries and protocols. Of course, I agreed. Complete separation of classified projects, mutual non-disclosure agreements for shared research, and separate labs, James added. Even at home, we can't risk cross-contamination of secure projects. I nodded, feeling a surge of appreciation for how quickly he grasped the implications. 2 separate home offices independently secured. Miranda was writing rapidly. What about shared discoveries? How do you want to handle intellectual property rights for collaborative projects? Split ownership, James and I said simultaneously, then looked at each other and laughed. With priority given to existing patents and research, I added. And mandatory security reviews before any joint publications, James continued. Miranda glanced between us, her expression softening slightly. I'll draft the additional clause. But first, shall we finish reviewing the original agreement? I squeezed James's hand. Ready to hear about the emergency evacuation protocols? Emergency evacuation protocols? James repeated, his smile fading. How bad could things get? Remember the quantum computing breakthrough in Singapore last year? I asked quietly. The one where the lead scientist disappeared? James's face darkened. She wasn't the only one. 3 other researchers vanished that same month. Different countries, all working on similar projects. Exactly. I leaned forward. The evacuation protocols aren't just for us. They're for our families too. Safe houses, new identities if necessary, completely untraceable funds. Like a witness protection program on steroids, he murmured. Miranda pulled out another section of the agreement. The evacuation procedures are detailed in Appendix C. Each party is required to memorize specific codes and protocols. No written copies will be permitted outside this office. As Miranda began outlining the emergency procedures, I watched James's face carefully. He was taking notes mentally. I could tell by the way his eyes narrowed slightly with each new detail. It was the same expression he wore when solving particularly complex security problems. The safe houses, he interrupted suddenly, they'll need to be technologically isolated. No internet, no cell signals, nothing that could be traced. Already arranged, I confirmed. Along with emergency medical supplies including. No, James cut in. Don't tell me the locations. The less each of us knows about the other's backup plans, the safer we both are. I felt a rush of pride and relief. He truly did understand. There's also a protocol for if one of us is compromised, Miranda continued, her voice carefully neutral. The word compromised hung in the air like a storm cloud. James's hand tightened on mine. If either party is captured or coerced, Miranda read, the other must assume all shared research is compromised. All joint projects must be immediately terminated. All data destroyed according to the protocols in Section 7.3. And, I added softly, we'd have to stay separated, for safety. James turned to face me fully. So if something happens to one of us, the other has to go dark, completely. No contact, no attempts at rescue. The words felt like glass in my throat, because any attempt at contact could lead them to the other person's work. James stood up again, pacing the length of the office. That's asking a lot, Olivia. To abandon each other if things go wrong. It's not abandonment, I insisted. It's protection. Miss Bennett, James addressed Miranda directly. Could you give us a moment alone? Miranda nodded, gathering some papers. I'll be in the conference room when you're ready to continue. After she left, James knelt in front of my chair, taking both my hands in his. Olivia, look at me. I met his gaze, seeing the intensity there that had first drawn me to him. I understand everything in this agreement. The security measures, the protocols, even the evacuation plans. But I need you to understand something too. He took a deep breath. If you're ever in danger, there is no power on earth that could stop me from coming for you. James. I started to protest. No, he said firmly. Some things are worth any risk. I felt tears welling up again, but for a different reason now. You don't know what you're saying. What I'm working on, if it fell into the wrong hands, could change or destroy the world. I get it. He smiled slightly. But here's the thing. I fell in love with you, not your work. And while I'll sign every clause in this agreement, while I'll follow every protocol and security measure, I need you to know that there's one thing I won't do. What's that? I whispered. I won't leave you behind. Ever. He reached up and wiped away a tear that had escaped down my cheek. So, maybe we need to add one more clause to this agreement. What kind of clause? One about having each other's backs, about being partners in every sense of the word. A mutual protection clause, I said slowly, considering the implications. But with specific parameters. We don't risk the work, but we also don't abandon each other. Exactly. James returned to his chair as I pressed the intercom button for Miranda. We create protocols for rescue operations that don't compromise security. When Miranda returned, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, we were both ready. We need to add another section, I told her. The last edition took me by surprise, she said, settling back behind her desk. What's this one about? Partnership protocols, James answered. Specifically, how to protect both the work and each other in crisis situations. Miranda's eyebrows rose slightly as she began taking notes. This is unusual for a prenuptial agreement. So is everything else in it, I pointed out. And this is the most important part. For the next hour, we crafted the new section. Emergency contact methods that couldn't be traced. Backup plans for backup plans. Ways to verify identities that couldn't be duplicated or forced. And finally, Miranda read back. In the event of a security breach or personal danger, both parties agree to prioritize human life while maintaining project security through the established containment protocols. It's a delicate balance, James mused, but it's possible. I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not just the man I loved, but the partner I needed. Someone who understood both the weight of what we carried and the importance of keeping our humanity while carrying it. One last thing, I said. We need a way to know if the other person is operating under duress. A signal that can't be faked. James's eyes lit up. What if we combine our security protocols, my quantum encryption with your neural interface markers? A dual authentication system, I breathed, catching his enthusiasm. Something that requires both our technologies working in sync. Miranda was writing rapidly. Should I include the technical specifications? No, James and I said together. Just note that a secure verification system will be implemented before the wedding, I added. The details stay with us. Miranda nodded, adding a final line to the document. Well, she said, setting down her pen, this is certainly the most unique prenuptial agreement I've ever handled. Shall we go through the final signing process? I looked at James. Are you sure about this? All of it? Am I sure about signing a prenup that includes emergency evacuation protocols, quantum encryption requirements, and neural interface security measures? James picked up the pen Miranda offered. Absolutely, because it also includes a promise that we face whatever comes together. I watched as he signed his name on each marked page, his handwriting steady and sure. When he finished, he handed the pen to me. Your turn, he said softly. Although I have to admit, when I laughed at the beginning of this meeting, I never imagined we'd end up here. I began signing, each signature binding us not just to each other, but to a future filled with both incredible possibilities and serious responsibilities. You're not laughing now, I observed, signing the final page. No, he agreed. Now I'm just amazed, and a little terrified, and completely in love. Miranda notarized the final signatures and began preparing copies for our secure storage locations. As she worked, James leaned close to me. So, he whispered, about that neural interface breakthrough. Not here, I murmured back, but I was smiling. Dinner at my place tonight? After we both go through standard security protocols? Wouldn't miss it. He squeezed my hand. Should I bring the quantum encryption specs I've been working on? Now you're talking romance, I teased. As we left Miranda's office, the setting sun painted the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and purple. We had just signed what might be the most unusual prenuptial agreement in history, but it felt right. In a world of advancing technology and increasing dangers, we had found a way to protect both our work and our love. And that was worth every complicated clause.